appreciate all you folks taking your time to spend with us. We really appreciate this. So you folks are in our Understanding Copilot for Microsoft 365 Extensibility via Microsoft Graph Connectors session. So a little bit about us. Again, my name is Brian T. Jacketts. I lead our customer and partner experience team for Copilot for Microsoft 365 Extensibility. Wouldn't be a Microsoft if it didn't have a really, really long name out there. Been at Microsoft for 13 years, doing services, now also in our PM role. Gladys, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. So actually, I'm a senior product manager in the Graph Customer and Partner Experience team. And I've been at Microsoft for 2 years, actually.
Excellent. So thank you all for joining for us. So for our agenda today, what are we going to talk about? So we're going to give you a quick little overview of Copilot for Microsoft 365 Extensibility, just kind of what options are available with this. Graph Connectors is one of those. So we'll touch a little bit on plugins and what you can do with that. If you want to dive a little bit deeper, though, there are some other sessions where you can see more about that. We're going to give you some demos. We want you to see what this actually looks like running inside of one of our environments. We have done the sacrificial things we need to for the demo gods this morning. Hopefully they save for us. We'll see how that goes. And then we'll do a little bit of a demo, or sorry, a deep dive for our graph connectors. So show you what are they, how do I build them, how can I administrate them, what are some of the different kind of tips and tricks to get the most value out of them, not only for working with Copilot for M365, but also for other experiences that are supported for that as well. And then we'll have also some guidance for you. So if you're an administrator, if you're a developer, we've got a couple things, some kind of go-dos that can help you out with that. And then we'll make sure to save some time for Q&A. If you do have questions as we're going through, feel free to raise your hand. We'll see how we're doing on time, if we're able to fit those in or not. Otherwise, we'll have some time at the very end for us to dedicate to that. So let's talk a little bit about Copilot for Microsoft 365 Extensibility. What kind of things are available to us with this? So I know everyone's probably seen this slide about 20 different times out there. This is the what all goes into Copilot for Microsoft 365. So down at the bottom on here, you can see our foundational models. This is really that large language model, and what kind of things can you do with that in terms of summarization, Q&A, natural language processing, being able to do translation into other languages. Lots of different things that you get just out of the box with that foundational model. We also add to that Microsoft Graph. This is what Microsoft knows about you in terms of your emails, your chats, your files, your tasks, other things that are being stored inside of Microsoft 365. So Microsoft Graph is the way that we store that data, surface it to end users, and make it available inside a lot of different locations, Copilot being one of those. We also have the different Microsoft 365 apps, so how we actually surface that out. So if you're inside of Outlook, if you're inside of Teams, if you're inside of Word, PowerPoint, all the different kind of apps like that. And then lastly, we can also ground this in internet data. So again, doing a web search to give us the most relevant, the most up-to-date information that may not exist inside of your corpus, inside of Microsoft 365 or some other kind of source like that. Now, what we're really looking for today is to extend this, and how can we make things a little bit extra in terms of maybe my data is not inside of Microsoft 365. So for everyone's kind of awareness, the main two options that you have for extensibility with Copilot for M365, you'll see up top we have plugins, and in the middle we've got our graph connectors. And there's going to be a little bit of difference. We're not going to dive into all the different differences between these but at a very high level, think about this as with plugins, this really is a way for us to extend out. We don't have a copy of that data. We're really doing real-time calls out to an API, to some other kind of source. And in that sense, we don't have that copy of the data inside of M365, so we don't have a way to really reason over the data itself. We know what the API is, we know what the description of what it can do is, so that's kind of what that plugin allows for us. But with Graph Connectors, we're actually going to bring a shallow copy of that data into Microsoft 365, basically part of Microsoft Graph. And because of that, we're actually able to know about the data itself. So we'll talk more about this as we go on, things like the schema. What do I actually have available to me in terms of properties, the actual content itself, what other kind of configurations about it. And because of that, you're able to actually match on that content and not just on what's in the plugin definition or the manifest, things like that in there. And I also want to call out on the right side on here, everything that we do with Copilot for Microsoft 365 is definitely going to be in terms of our responsible AI. So in terms of the data, you only have access to what you have access to. This is not going to be a way for us to go and read somebody else's mailbox if you don't have permissions to that. Or if I'm going to an external data service, again, you'll only have access to the data that you have access to, not more things than that. Now today, we're going to focus mostly on our graph connectors. Again, we'll give you kind of a little high level in terms of the other pieces as well. So when we look at our little matrix in terms of what is available to us inside of Microsoft 365, part of our Copilot experience on here, Again, we take that little diagram that we saw earlier. You've got, again, Microsoft 365 apps. You've got graph your data, internet. Really, this is what Copilot for Microsoft 365, what can it reason over by itself? So we have things inside of SharePoint, in Teams, Exchange, other sources like that. That's basically the known world for what Copilot can do. But when we look at the extensibility story, what we're really doing is we're kind of going on two axes here. You'll see on the left, we have skills, and down the bottom, we have knowledge. So as I mentioned, with that foundational model, those skills, there's going to be some prepackaged things that Copilot knows how to do. Things like summarization, Q&A, natural language processing, translation, so on and so forth. But a lot of times, you may have some way to extend that out. You have an API to go do your special sauce with that data or do some kind of additional things for it. So in terms of plugins, that's really that way that we extend the actionability, the different things, the capabilities, those skills. What can Copilot actually do with those things? And then when we look on the bottom for knowledge, this is really about, well, what data does it have access to? We've already mentioned SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, and so forth. What if your data resides somewhere else? Might be on a file share, might be on a third-party SaaS service, might be in a line of business application, wherever that's at. So for all those kind of concepts, you think about, I need to be able to have Copilot reason over that data, but it's not inside of M365. So this is where we're going to be taking graph connectors, again, this is really our topic for today, to be able to take that data, bring a copy in so that Copilot knows about it and can actually go reason over that content. So it's really empowering your users to have more access to information and to be able to get their jobs done better. Now, we're not going to talk through all of the bullet points on the slide on here. This is really just kind of meant to give you a high-level overview of some of the differences that you'll see between graph connectors and plugins. Some of the key things to note on here, when we're talking about Microsoft Graph Connectors, this is really about having unstructured data. So I have things inside of a file share. I have things inside of a wiki, knowledge base articles, pages. That kind of unstructured data is really good for Copilot to be able to reason over. Again, it is a language model, so that that set of data that you have that's going to be unstructured really gets to the best results in terms of what you can work with that. Contrast that with plugins. If you had things that are in a very structured format, could be in a database, could be in some kind of CRM system, something else like that, there's ways that that works a little bit better because now we actually have specific APIs on that to surface the data or other ways to interact with it. You also note in terms of how do we actually interact with the data, in terms of is it read-only or is it read-write? With Graph Connectors, we have a read-only copy of that data, so we actually can't go back and update the source. When you want to interact with that content, we'll show you some demos here in a minute, what you're actually going to do is you get a link back to the source information, and then now you can go and collaborate on that in the source platform. So great way to discover the content, be able to see where that's at, but when you actually want to go and update it, that'll actually just be a deep link into the source. Compare that with plugins. We actually do have actionability with that. So you can wire up APIs that say, oh, go update this database entry. Go update this third-party SaaS service with this new information based on what the user is pushing in through the prompt. So some key differences that you'll see just between what is available with that in terms of our graph connectors and our plugins. And now we're actually going to flip over, and Gladys is going to walk us through a couple of different demos. I think it's a great opportunity for you to actually see what we're going to be talking about here in this session with graph connectors. So Gladys, let's flip over to you.
What I'm going to show you today is actually one of the graph connectors that I created for ServiceNow knowledge base. And let me get started with one of the prompts. So it's actually, this is something that I was planning to use because now that I'm traveling here to the conference, that's I needed to have that kind of information, and I know that is sourced in part of the ServiceNow articles that we have there. So in this example, you see that I'm actually able to get all the information I need for booking my travel, hotel accommodation. And the super interesting here is that you can actually reference this information. You can see that it's actually coming from ServiceNow. You can actually click directly from there to link, and it will take you to see if you want to have more details on it. So you can do that as well. Another thing that I want to show you is I've been seeing that there's some kind of email interruptions recently, and I want to see what's happening. So I'm going to check if there are some kind of emails probably coming. It can be coming through Microsoft Graph. It can be probably an article that we have. Let's see. See, actually, there's an email interruption that will happen tonight. So I'll see all the references. There's actually another article that was created to inform about this. So that's cool that I can actually quickly check that.
One other quick thing to highlight on here, as Gladys is going through the references that are down the bottom of this, note that we're actually going to multiple data sources. We've got our ServiceNow KB articles, but I might also have some SharePoint files, some emails, some Teams chats. And it looks like you actually have a couple of, is that emails or chats in there?
Yeah, chats in there.
Yeah, so we can actually
going on.
Yep, we can actually merge together multiple data sources into that final result for you. So it might be that, hey, it actually exists the answer in multiple locations, or I need to actually bring that data together. So great to see. Thanks Gladys.
Yeah. Now, I want to create something that helps me real quick to inform my manager about what is going on. So what I can do is just ask Copilot if they can draft an email to actually inform my manager about these interruptions. And I would like to include that article that I found about it in ServiceNow. So let's see. Okay, so yeah, you can see that it created the draft. I'm actually, it is able to recognize that I'm logged in and can say that it's me that is sending the message to my manager. So that's cool. And now I would like to switch here to Copilot, but now in Microsoft Teams. And I just really want to see if it can give me some of the issues that we have about OneDrive. Now, this is a different source. This was actually created through a custom graph connector using the Microsoft Graph Connector API. And I'm actually ingesting all the issues that we have in a specific repository for Graph. So you will see here that we do have few issues related to OneDrive. So that's cool. I'm waiting just to see the references about it. You can have it here, and you will see that this is actually coming through our custom connector for GitHub. So that's cool. But now I want to do something more interesting. So I'm going to I want a summary of this, because yeah, I do have these references here, but I would like to really have like this information, like a summary in with the hyperlinks to those GitHub issues. This is actually, I want to have like a call to action to our content writers, so they can check these issues and go and fix them and actually update the documentation that we have available for this. Okay, I'm just gonna wait until this is done. And yeah, once again, it's kind of referencing all the issues that we have for OneDrive, and it's providing me with this email that I can just review and send to my content writers. So that was it.
Excellent. I gotta say, folks, was that 5 for 5 on demos live, no pre-recorded. So thank you, Gladys. That was awesome to see out there.
Thank you.
All right, we'll flip back over to the slides, and Gladys is going to talk us a little bit through what we've got with Graph Connectors, and then we'll do our deep dive into some of the more things on here.
So really, with Graph Connectors and with the demos that I just showed you, what I really wanted to express and show you there was actually how powerful Graph Connectors can be. What we're trying to do with Graph Connectors is actually provide you with another tool to actually ground all the data that you have in external sources and have that together and available in Microsoft Graph in the same semantic index. So you actually get like a shallow copy of that data from those external sources for you to reference here and use into day-to-day work. So that's an awesome thing that you can do with Graph Connectors. That's cool. And now, as you see here, the power of Graph Connectors actually is, you see in some of the examples that we were able to actually reference those documents using keywords, as well as another tools or tasks that I created was trying to create summarization, creating drafts as well that I can use for sending on emails. I can actually ask as well to create some tables and provide that information that is going to be like super easy to share with other colleagues.
Thank you, Gladys, for the demos and for a little intro about Graph Connectors. So where can we actually surface things for Graph Connectors? Now, there's a couple different experiences out here. Some you'll see are going to be generally available. Some are going to be preview. But let's actually start down at the bottom on here in terms of what can we actually go access with Graph Connectors. So really, any data source that you have, as long as you can make a request against Microsoft Graph APIs, really that's a valid source for where you might be able to pull that data from. Could be a line of business application, could be a file share, a database, could be a cloud service, some kind of third-party application. As long as you can read that data and make that graph request, you can be able to ingest that data into Microsoft Graph. And then what do we do with that data? Again, we're basically creating an index of that content, and we actually do this in kind of a hybrid fashion. There is a lexical index. This is what we call keyword queries. So literally look for Project Contoso or something like that. We also add on top of that semantic matching. So being able to say that when I reference a certain, let's say a code word, or I'm looking for a travel policy, I notice that I should also be looking for airplanes and trains and cars and taxis because those are semantically linked to those keywords that I just passed in. So graph connectors give us kind of that dual capability, that hybrid search for that kind of content. And then we expose it in a number of different Microsoft 365 experiences. So we already have some that are generally available. You'll see on the left-hand side on here, Microsoft Search. This includes things like our Office.com or Microsoft365.com inside of SharePoint, as well as our Bing experience. We also have the Microsoft 365 app. So if you're looking for content recommendations, if you're looking for recently accessed files, another way that you can actually go and find that kind of content out there, not only for Microsoft 365 data, but also for graph-connected content. We also have Context IQ. If you've ever seen like app mention inside of Outlook and Teams, very similar, but we actually do a /, and now you can actually deep link or reference a file, but also in this case, graph connectors. So other ways to be able to find that content that you're looking for, and then be able to pass it into different experiences. And then lastly, our newest experience for this, which is going to be Copilot for Microsoft 365, being able to reason over that third-party data for us to be able to access that and get more power and capabilities out of Copilot. Now, in terms of where can you actually find these graph connectors, there are a number of graph connectors that Microsoft ourselves have built. This is really just based on customer demand. This is not an exhaustive listing as I put onto the slide on here. Just note this is kind of a sampling of things that you can look for. So Microsoft has already gone out and built about 18 different graph connectors based on customer demand. We also have over 150 or so graph connectors available from our ISV partners, from SI partners, and other folks. Or you can even build your own custom one. So if there's not one already pre-built by Microsoft or a partner, you could actually go and create your own using those Microsoft Graph APIs if you actually go and develop that out there. Now, as we talk about these graph connectors, what actually is involved with them? There's really 3 building blocks for a graph connector. You're going to have a connection, you're going to have a schema, and you're going to have permissions that are tied to that. That connection, think about it like a logical container. This is really just telling us what's the name of it, the description, what's the search settings, any other kind of additional configurations that we need just to be able to operate that. Inside of that connection, you're also going to have a schema. And the way to think about this is a flat hierarchy of properties along with the content itself. So you as a developer or as an administrator, you can define what are those things that we need to know about for this content. So I need to know the title, I need to know who the author is, last modified date, the status, the project that it's tied to. All that kind of information are things that we're going to tie back to that. And we also have something called semantic labels, which we're going to touch upon here in another slide. And the last line here is permissions. Who has access to this content that should be able to see it inside of all those different experiences that we saw on the previous slide out there? Those permissions, they can either be an allow list or a deny list, and those help us understand in all the different experiences, whether it's search, whether it's Copilot or anywhere else, who can actually go access that content. So again, it can be users, can be groups, can be things called custom groups or external groups, and also everyone in the tenant. Sometimes you have public content that, hey, it doesn't matter who actually is going to be accessing this. Those are folks that are going to be able to see what that content is. Now, as I mentioned about the schema, a couple things just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into here. Let's actually build the slide out. There are different things that we're going to define inside of that schema. You're going to have things like your property name, just literally what is the source name for this. Search attributes. Is something refinable? Is it queryable? Is it retrievable? A lot of different things for that. We also have these things called semantic labels. These are very, very key when we talk about Copilot for Microsoft 365. The idea here is those semantic labels, these are common industry things. Again, things like title, modified date, modified by, created by, creator. Also, the URL back to the source information. So those help our indexer understand how should the search engine be able to approach that data so that when we retrieve it inside of search, inside of Copilot, all data experiences, how should I be able to think about that? Very, very important to fill out as many of those semantic labels as possible. If you're using a Microsoft-built connector or a partner one, usually they're already filled out for you. But if you're already building your own custom one, something to think about as how do we map those different properties into there to make sure that we have them. And lastly, the bottom piece on here, searchable. This is a very, very important aspect for your search settings. If you want Copilot to do that semantic matching for your content, you have to mark that little checkbox for make this searchable. What that's really doing is doing a full text indexing of that content. So when I search for Project Contoso, I can look in any of the different properties or any of the different kind of columns out there that have that defined on there. So make sure that you do set that when you're doing your configuration and such for that. Now, when we talk about graph connectors, there's kind of two main approaches, I would say, for ingesting that content. Again, this is not a real-time access to the data. It is going to be, in some kind of fashion, a schedule or an event-driven model. And so we like to think of this in kind of two different fashions. You've got the scheduled processes, or you've got more of a near real-time, and I'll put that in air quotes because it's close to real-time, but not exactly. For scheduled, this could be once a day, once an hour, once every 5 minutes. Whatever schedule makes sense to you for that source data. Really, it's just a matter of, I need to have a copy of the data, but it doesn't have to be the most recent. I'm going to click on that and go back to collaborate on it or whatever else. I need just enough to kind of power the experience for search and for Copilot and so forth. The other option on here is the event-driven option, where I need to have things literally as soon as possible, as soon as an update happens, as soon as something's created. Usually this is using some kind of eventing system. So in the source system might be a webhook or a change notification, might be a database trigger, might be whatever else. As you have some kind of processing pipeline, I'm going to hook onto the end of that, and I'm going to basically push over a copy of that, whatever the delta is, over to Microsoft Graph. Now, it's not that you have to do an exclusive one or the other. Maybe the first time that you do this, it's a scheduled kind of full crawl, and then from there on out, you do the event-driven as needed going forward. So really up to you how you want to process that, but just note that those are kind of the two big buckets that we see in terms of processing for this. And we also want to touch on the permissions model for this. This is not going to be a hard and fast rule for everything out there. Again, it might be that the content that you have, everyone in the tenant has access to it. If that's not the case, though, we do need to implement things called access control lists, or ACLs. You can define these per item, and so you can say, hey, for this individual file or for this KB article, I only want these individual users to be allowed to see it, or you can even do a deny list on that to say, these people cannot go and see that. You can set that for everyone in the tenant, or you can use any one of these three different levels on here. So for those folks not familiar, Azure Active Directory, we've renamed to Microsoft Entra. I'm always having to catch myself with the rename on us. But we have our Microsoft Entra ID users, Entra ID groups, or external groups, which is something completely different. For the Entra ID, in some fashion, you have to tie back to that user. Whether you have their object ID inside of Entra, or you have their user principal name, their email address, some way to look them up so you can actually go and assign those permissions onto there. For groups, this actually can help you in terms of, I know the name of the group who has access to this. Might be our marketing department, might be executives, might be some project team. I don't actually have to track the membership of that group anymore. I just tell it, oh, go look up that group inside of Entra. When the user's going to look through the experience inside of Search or Copilot or whatever else, that's what we actually go and reference to know, hey, who has actually had access to this content. The last bucket on here is for external groups. This is where, hey, we actually aren't using Microsoft Entra for our membership or for some kind of authentication. A lot of times you'll see this as, I need to have role-based access or some kind of profile property, or I have some other non-Entra membership provider. With these, you can define what those groups are. You still have to populate it, though, with an Entra ID user. So in some fashion, at the end of the day, we have to circle back to, we have to know who they are inside of Microsoft Entra. That's how they're going to experience it inside of Teams, inside of Copilot, inside of Bing, SharePoint, wherever else that might be. So lots of ways for us to have flexibility in terms of how can we actually access that data. Now, for the developers in the room, again, who's our developers in here? Excellent. So who already has a Copilot for Microsoft 365 license? Okay, that's decent, maybe 30–40% of the crowd. Who has a Copilot for Microsoft 365 developer tenant? Oh, excellent. I see at least a couple of hands on here. So, if you are looking to develop, you can go and build a graph connector in any tenant that you would like, as long as you have the right permissions in there. If you want to test it for Copilot for Microsoft 365, you have to have a license for Copilot for Microsoft 365. So there's kind of three options on here. The first two are available today. The last one is going to be coming a little bit later on this year. So the first one, our group, we actually run something called the Microsoft 365 Developer TAP, our Technology Adoption Program. If you are an ISV partner, basically a software vendor, independent software vendor, we can provide to you a developer tenant. You then purchase your Copilot licenses inside of that developer tenant. So if you're looking for more information, you can find the link down on here. Feel free to sign up. In the middle on here, this is more of a, hey, we're not an ISV, or we just want to go and outright buy a tenant and then go and add Copilot to them. Totally valid to go do that. The cheapest option that you can go with on here is the Microsoft 365 Business Basic Edition. I think it's like $6 a month. You can then add your Copilot license on top of that. So kind of your two main options for today, either part of the tap, or you can go and outright purchase that tenant, add your Copilot license to that. In the future, later this year, dates are subject to change. We'll say targeting September timeframe. We're looking to make the developer program that already exists today, the Microsoft 365 developer program. You can be able to go and purchase a tenant there, or sorry, get a tenant through that, and then add your Copilot license on top of that. The way things work today is those developer tenants, they're not commerce enabled, is what we call. So you actually can't add licenses to it. It's a restriction that we're working our best to go around that process in, of course, approved and safe ways, so that we actually are allowing people to be able to go and access those Copilot licenses in those tenants out there. Couple last things to just kind of mention on here in terms of our administrator experiences for this. So for admins in the crowd, we've got developers, we've got a little bit there, and admins, where we actually go and manage our different graph connectors out there. So inside of the Microsoft Admin Center, so admin.microsoft.com, you can go under the Search and Intelligence Center. You can just go and search from it from the top bar on there. Under Data Sources is where we're going to see all of our graph connectors. So here you can go and do things like modify your schema. You can go and set up staged rollout, something we'll talk about here in a second. And see the status, how many items do I have ingested. If you're looking for it, we actually do provide a 1 million items for 90 days trial. So if you don't have the appropriate licensing, or if you're looking for more content to bring into there, there's actually usually a little button in the upper left on here that'll say, hey, go and give me a 1 million item trial that I can be able to actually add to my tenant. So a nice way to be able to test things out before you actually decide to maybe move forward with a full production rollout. And lastly, from an admin experience on here, staged rollout. This is a really cool feature that just actually we deployed, I think it was like last November or so. Let's say you've got a data source that you want to hook up to, but you don't want everybody in the tenant to be able to go and see that data. The way Graph Connectors work is literally it's a tenant-wide kind of deployment. So do you want everyone going to your ServiceNow articles, your Jira tickets, to your GitHub issues, or whatever else inside of here? With staged rollout, you can actually define, here's the 2 or 3, let's say admins or our red team or whoever else is going to be testing things. They're the only people who are going to be able to see that Graph Connector content inside of Search and inside of Copilot. So a great way to test things out before you're ready to do a full production deployment. Highly, highly encourage everybody to go and use features like this. Again, this will apply to those two experiences out there. When you're ready, there's actually a little button at the bottom that says, hey, now I'm ready to do away with staged rollout. Roll out for everybody inside the tenant. They're able to actually go and use that stuff. So great way for us to be able to roll that out for certain users without impacting the entire tenant. So to kind of recap what we've talked about so far today on here, Copilot for Microsoft 365 is giving us a lot of different capabilities that we can do with our data, whether it's inside of M365, now also with our graph connected content. Some of the things that you will see with this, again, we're going to see more relevancy for the content. We actually have a copy of it available to us, so we're able to actually do more with the reasoning for that, being able to ask questions and so forth. It is secure, so we have our permissions that are being ingested as part of that, so a great way for us to be able to work with that. Again, because we have the power of that semantic indexing of the content, you're going to get more than just simple lexical keyword searches for that, but also personalized results. As you saw with Gladys' demo on there, in one case you actually saw it put her name down there at the bottom of that content. Great way to actually personalize the content that you're working for to be able to get the best results out there. Yeah, so with this, I'll actually turn back over to Gladys. We can do a little bit of kind of our go-dos for what you can do with the content out there.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Well, actually, with this, I just wanted to mention like some of the things that you can actually now go and do if you're an admin. So one of the things that I will start is actually go and check the connectors gallery that we have. We have a lot of connectors there. I think around 18 that were created actually by Microsoft, but we have a lot of other connectors created by partners. So you can start there checking out that content. And of course, as Brian mentioned, we have these new features. Like I love this feature, and a lot of customers are using it. This actually helps you to actually introduce graph connectors to a set of group of users in your organization. So that's cool. You actually check the performance. You can adjust any settings that you need, check if the group's permissions are okay. So that's actually cool for you to test that with a specific group of users. And of course, I will start by thinking about planning on use cases that you can use in your organization, creating some prompts that can actually be useful as well for your employees or any user. And now for the developer, something that was mentioned as well is how can you improve relevance now that you will be using Copilot? And of course, I will start by providing a good description of your connection. In this example of a good description, I will mention anything that how your users refer to that specific connection. Like they can say yes, no, they can say service now. So those specific details can be there used in the description. What type of content are you sharing with this data source? So you can mention, I'm just creating, helping customers to get tickets in their day-to-day. So you can specify all those details in that description. And now, of course, as Brian mentioned, it's super important to apply all the semantic labels that you have in the content, and of course, making them searchable so you can have a better experience in retrieving those results. And of course, don't forget to fill out the content element that you have for each connection that you can use specifically to refer to the content description and everything in that connection.
So actually, at this point, I'd love to open the floor and questions. I see a hand already raised back there. Yes, question.
If you're an organization that doesn't use Azure AD for SSO, what are the challenges with that with Graph connectors, and what's the best way to overcome that?
Excellent question. So to repeat for everybody, if you're an organization that's not using Azure AD, Microsoft Entra for your membership and for all of your identification, what do you have available to you? How can you kind of overcome that challenge? So there's a couple of things that might be available to you. Number one is, if the data that you're accessing is not going to be permissioned, it's literally just, hey, this is the cafeteria menu, this is knowledge base articles that everybody has access to. Great, you can just make that available to users without having to worry about the permissions that are out there. If you do need to add permissions to that, in some fashion, you need to be able to tie back to who is the user inside of Microsoft Entra. Most times we see this by email address, or you have some other kind of conversion service. Take my employee number, tie that back to what's my email, and be able to kind of merge the identities there, and then add the ACLs that apply to that. So those are usually the main ways that we see it. If you're building a custom application though, a lot of times what we'll see is they will implement some form of SSO so that I can take whatever my external provider is, do like a connect to identity provider kind of button in there. And so each user will need to actually go through that flow themselves. It's like almost I log into my phone and it knows that, hey, when I go into GitHub, here's my Azure AD user. And so it connects the two by creating a record to tie those two together. That does rely on the user taking action though to actually go and do that kind of process. So ideally though, you have user ID or email address or something else to tie them together that you can do in a batch process and just do that on some kind of frequency. Question in front here.
Looking at using semantic index for line of business application, where would I use the semantic index in Graph Connect as opposed to something like an AI search or other type of vector search?
Excellent question. So for repeating everybody, if I'm looking to do search, like why or when should I use the semantic index versus kind of AI search, either through Azure or some other kind of provider? This really comes down to the build versus buy almost. For a lot of organizations, they don't have data scientists, they don't have folks to actually go and implement that AI search. They just want to say, hey, here's my data, go and index this, go crawl it, and give me kind of the results that are out from that. That's where you're relying on the semantic index as part of Microsoft 365, as part of Microsoft Graph. So really it's just a matter of give me the data and be able to reason over that kind of content out there. If you need to do things like fine-tuning relevancy or ranking or being able to modify the way that like a query comes in and we append extra keywords to it or ways to personalize it, that's really more of that build decision and where you're going to go with the customized AI search or some of the kind of solution like that. Typically the way we see those conversations going. Great question though. Question in the back.
Yeah, so first and foremost, I know there's developers in here, so if anyone has experience developing custom connectors that will actually work with modern offer protected third-party identity provider, around here. Help. But my question for you, I had heard yesterday that so the semantic index is able to reason over all of the information in Microsoft 365 tenants. You have the ability to pull in information outside of Microsoft 365 Graph Connectors. But I heard some random metric around the number of external items that can be
So to repeat the question out there, if you are ingesting external items, we heard that there's some kind of limit based on the number of licenses that you have. We didn't actually show a slide on this because it starts to get into the whole licensing conversation. I'm not the licensing expert. I don't want to give you the most incorrect information, but to your specific one, in order to use graph connectors, you have to have appropriate index quota in your tenant to be able to ingest items in. The way that you get this is either through an E5 or a Copilot for Microsoft 365 license. Each of those individually will give you 500 items of index quota. So if you actually have both of those, I have an E5 and I have a Copilot license, each user gets 1,000 items that's going to be pooled at the tenant level. So that's kind of first part of, you may already have licensing that gets you enough quota, might be a couple thousand, might be a couple million items, depending on how many licenses you have. If you don't have enough index quota through those quota grants, then you can actually purchase what we call add-on SKUs, and that's in the packaging of 1 million items for $1,000 per month. Now note that all those, the numbers for the pricing on that will definitely depend on what's your enterprise agreement with Microsoft or if you have any kind of discounts. But that's kind of the going rate for just the market value for that. Question up here? Good question. Do you apply any kind of security compliance retention policies for the data that's brought in? This will be totally up to whoever is the owner or the developer of the graph connector. So if they have some kind of policy that says only bring in the last year's worth of content, and they're regularly going through and removing the old content that is out there, that will apply to how they bring that in. From a compliance standpoint, the data that's brought in through graph connectors, it's actually sitting side by side with the same data that you have for SharePoint, for Exchange, and the same basic compliance boundary as we call it. So for anything in terms of compliance, ownership of data, it's basically side by side with your Microsoft 365 tenant data, just from a compliance standpoint. The retention though, or deletion, anything else like that, it'll be up to whoever's the owner, the developer of the graph connector. We don't go and manually or automatically delete content on behalf of them. So as long as that connector is valid and no one's deleted, touched, or anything else like that, that content will continue to exist in there until someone does a delete, an update, some other kind of operation on that data. See another hand up here?
That shadow copy of that data, is that at the user level, or is that at a global copy of data that's available to everyone?
Sure, so repeating the question, that shallow copy of data that we bring in, is that a user copy or is that a tenant level? It actually is at the tenant level. So graph connectors must be deployed by a global administrator within the tenant. So it's not going to be a per user kind of copy of that. It's literally available to everyone in the tenant until you add permissions to it. So once you add the ACLs, the access control list, now it's only these 10 users have access to this, or only this group of people have access to that content out there. But it is something that is deployed globally, and it is stored at the tenant level from an allocation standpoint. Question over here?
Yeah, about the code, what's the definition of the item?
Oh, excellent question. I love that you asked this. What actually is a quota item, an individual item that's out there? So this will basically be one item in the source repository. If that's a file, if it's a database record, if it's a page, if it's a single record. So what was that?
Yeah, like a document, like Word, Excel. Yeah, it would count towards one item only.
Yep. So every time you're doing a create new item inside of the connection, that'll be one item of index quota. Okay, go ahead.
So if a user asks a question, give me 100 objects or something, it's not 100 items.
Even the good follow-up is there any kind of consumption? Like I put the content in there, do I get charged, or is there any kind of quota for like how much I can actually bring that out? No. As soon as the content is in there, you are free to query that, retrieve it, summarize it, however you want to. If you do get to your quota max though, you can still do updates or deletes on existing items, but you can't add new ones in. So there's no consumption of, I queried this thing 1,000,000 times. I used up some kind of quota out there. That doesn't exist. So once it's in, and you're free to use it for anybody who's licensed in the tenant. Yep. Trying to look through. Yep. Question in the middle here.
If I create a custom graph connector to ingest data for Copilot for Microsoft 365,
Mm-hmm.
is there a way other than their API to get it out to a custom Copilot?
So if I'm hearing your question correctly, I have built a custom graph connector. I want to surface that data, and you said to a custom Copilot, was that correct? Okay, so today, the ways that you can bring that data back out, we've got the native Microsoft 365 experiences, kind of end user things. We also have our search API on Microsoft Graph. And you can actually target that to either individual connections or to say, hey, just all of them by any of the graph connectors that are in there. As long as your application is consented to go and access those different graph connectors, you actually can pull the items back out through the search API to show inside of an external website, into a Teams app, into a custom Copilot, anywhere else that you'd want to. And you can apply filters too. So, hey, find me things based on a keyword or based on who created it or any of those properties that we talked about in the schema. You can use those things if you've checked the, refinable or filterable, whatever that property is, refinable. So you can say, oh, use this as like a way to filter that out, and now give me those things back out. Oh, one more in the middle.
So, ingesting documents. Does the semantic index apply any type of chunking to those documents? So say I've got a 200-page document that needs to get ingested. Is there chunking involved there, or is there a limit on how much data from a document can be ingested?
Ooh, excellent question. Well, come find us afterwards and we'll show you the document. No, so I say because there's a documentation page that we updated a couple of months ago to answer this kind of question, because it comes up a lot, is how much data can I ingest in for a single item? So when I tell you the answer, don't do the, oh my gosh. So it's 4 megabytes per item, but that's parsed text. As in, I took this 100-page Word document and I took just literally the text out of there. None of the bolding, formatting, other kind of things that are in there. When you do the rough conversions of 4 megabytes of parsed text, it's actually like 800 pages of a Word document. So if you take the plain text description or the content of that file, you actually get a lot more in there than you think. But yeah, it's 4 megabytes per item that you ingest in. It's really a payload limit on the Microsoft Graph API is what that comes down to. But I will find the page for you after the session so that you can refer to that. And I saw some clapping in the back on there. Thank you for the additional support. Oh yes, when you are working with files or other kind of data sources, it's up to you to actually get that plain text representation of it. You can't take just a PDF or a Word doc or something else and natively bring that in. You have to extract that content out. So if you have a service that does that, if you have some kind of API or library, that's a way to actually extract that out for ingestion in there. All right, don't see another hand. Oh, one last question. I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of it? Oh, how do you tweak the relevancy? Love this question. This actually comes up with a lot of our customers. When you're doing things, so the question was, how do you tweak the relevancy, the ranking for content? So the way it works today is when you're in search, when you're inside a Copilot, the indexer, because it has those semantic labels, because it has a copy of the data, we're going to be doing essentially that keyword query, that kind of semantic matching across all the data sources that might apply. Could be for SharePoint, Exchange, Teams, Graph Connected content. We're going to look at things like, hey, how many times does that keyword appear in the content? How near to the top does it appear? So we do what we call whole page ranking. We get back all the different individual results, and then we compare them across each other, and then that becomes here's my top 10, my top 20, whatever the results are that are in there. If you as an administrator want to be able to influence the results out there, there's not a mechanism today, but there are some things I will say. There's a major conference coming up in a couple of weeks called Build. You might want to pay attention to some of the things that are going to be potentially announced at that time frame, where you're going to have some more capabilities for how do I influence the results that are coming out there. Nothing available today, but just keep that in your back pocket in terms of I should attend some certain sessions when that comes up.
Sorry, so in Microsoft Search, you have the dashboard to see how is search being used. You have similarity to the graph connectors.
In what sense for the dashboard?
No, but so for example, what have users been asking, what have users been commenting?
So essentially, do I have usage reports for graph connectors? Yes, when you go into Search Intelligence Center, there's a section on there for reporting. It will show you how many items have been ingested. I believe how many times it's actually come up in search results. So you can kind of see like, hey, this ServiceNow connector versus this Confluence one, how many hits are we seeing across those? It will not give you individual user results. It's going to be the tenant level, but you can dive into some reporting inside of there. If there's things that you're looking for that are not in there, come let us know so we can go talk to the right team for, hey, can we surface those kind of things and whatnot? All right, I want to make sure we'll get through our last set of resources on here, and then we'll stick around up here on the top if you have additional questions you'd like to ask for. A couple different resources. Feel free to take a picture on here. One that we did not add on here that you do want to take note of, that connectors licensing page, aka.ms/connectors pricing. I'll make sure to update this and you can get a version on there for the one that goes on to Huva. But if you're a developer and you're looking to actually go and develop graph connectors, you can find our developer docs out there. If you want to see some of our tutorials or quick starts, ways to quickly and easily get started with this, they actually walk you through step by step, new project, add the different code files for this, and be able to actually go away and develop. Great ways to work with that. We also have our graph connectors gallery, as Gladys was mentioning earlier. If you want to see which ones are already available out there, aka.ms/graph connectors gallery. We've got learning module on this, so you can actually go through and see. It's literally a couple hours long to actually see all the different pieces that go into this. So if you want to really deep dive into building or working with graph connectors, good information out there. And we also have a video that we recorded a couple months ago that shows you some of the demos that we had today, but in some different areas for working with our graph connectors in Copilot. Thank you all so much for attending today. Really appreciate your questions. Thank you.